Yeah, yeah. Just move past it. Nothing to see here. It's incredible. It's just another example of the sort of fantasy world, dystopian fantasy world that the
You
Republican
won.
Party is living
Once.
in
Do
now.
not get ahead of
And
yourself.
they don't want to think about that because that was a bad thing for them and a bad thing for their guy, who incited the whole thing, Donald Trump. And so
Yep.
let's just pretend it never happened. It's astonishing for
If the
for
tables
one
were
of our two major
turned,
political parties to have lost its mind to that extent.
yeah. If the tables were turned, they'd be telling the truth and also pointing out how this weakens us around the world, especially our national security, a weakness from within that they could promulgate and grow. It's compared to 84% of Democrats and 54% of independents who say the events of that day should never be forgotten. That 74% was likely what was behind a marathon session in the Senate overnight as Republicans stalled a crucial vote on the January 6th commission. Republicans were on the Senate floor until just before 3 this morning, debating an unrelated bill to delay the vote. Now the vote isn't expected until possibly later today. 60 votes are needed for the independent January 6th commission to move forward. So far, only 3 Republicans, 3, have expressed their support. Senator Lisa Murkowski, the only Republican backing the January 6th commission bill as is, and she expressed her disappointment in her colleagues' attempts to block the vote.
It's important that there be a focus on the facts and on the truth, and that may be unsettling, but we need to understand that. We just can't pretend that nothing bad happened or that people just got too excitable. Something bad happened, and it's important to lay that out. I think there's more to be learned. I want to know more, and I want to know, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know, but I need to know.
There's so much to find out, and there's so much misinformation out there that some of the misinformation is easily dismissed, where you have people saying on the Trump right that it was Antifa. It clearly was not Antifa. And none other than Kevin McCarthy screamed and swore at Donald Trump as the insurrection was going down, saying this is not Antifa. What do you think, stupid? These are your people here. Yeah. These are your people here. So that lie continues to spread, of course, throughout the Trump right. And there are other lies. It was just really just sort of peaceful demonstrators, nothing to see here. The Ron Johnson claim, there was really nothing to be worried about, while police officers were being beaten and brutalized within an inch of their lives. So you have that part of it too. Mike Allen, what I don't really understand is, you and I both, we've been around the Hill long enough. We know that a lot of times leadership will say, hey, listen, Joe, you know what? Would like to have your vote here. This is a vote of conscience. So you do what you want to do, but that happens a lot of times in votes like this. And certainly Mitch McConnell said that during impeachment. Vote of conscience. You do what you feel like you need to do. What I don't understand is what has changed. Why is Mitch McConnell, based on reporting, all the reporting I've seen, Mitch McConnell's telling Republicans, I need your vote. I need your vote. What is it about this commission that he fears? Why is it that he's telling, instead of just saying vote your conscience like he did on impeachment, why is he now doing everything short of demanding their support?
Joe, it's a little tough to compete with Zapruder baseball. But if you look at this, there's two things going on here. And with Senator McConnell, he's thinking about one thing. He's thinking, how can I rebuild my majority? How am I going to recruit the candidates that I need to get back the Senate majority, looking ahead to next cycles? And so something that to most of the Republicans that you served with and that we've covered over the years, this would seem like a no-brainer. You've pointed out again and again on the show why this commission is needed. But this is one of the ones where they're whipping and pushing as opposed to vote your conscience. And we have a little new reporting on possible fallout from this vote. So Senator Joe Manchin, everybody's trying to read his mind. And he's been very strong in saying that Republicans should be for this commission. We've talked to some Democrats who think that this expected vote by Republicans trying to kill this commission, that's a new wedge that Democrats can use with Manchin to say to him, you're being schooled, you're being played by Republicans. They are not voting, arguing in good faith here. This commission is proof of it. And because of that, you should soften your view on the filibuster, move toward a Senate where Democrats can get their way in a 50-50 Senate, Vice President Harris breaking the tie, instead of right now where you need 10 Republicans to get something real.
Yeah, and Joe Manchin's going to be hearing a lot of that, but he's been Sherman-esque in saying that he doesn't want to, quote, destroy the government by getting rid of the filibuster. I don't think. I think that's being a little melodramatic. I don't think. Go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, at the time he said that, he's still holding out hope for some Republican movement. And so if you get no movement past that graphic that you showed, that's where there's an opening to say to Joe Manchin, look, this is a pipe dream. You're going to get Republicans on these big questions. Give it up. Let's pass things that we believe in and need to for our voters.
Yeah, Jonathan Lemire, I'm trying to remember who said this yesterday. I think it was Senator Bennett said nobody hates Donald Trump more than Mitch McConnell. He's probably right there. And so it leads me, obviously, if you looked at what Mitch McConnell said on January the 6th, if you saw what Mitch McConnell said about impeachment, do what you feel like you need to do on impeachment. If you saw what he said after his vote on impeachment, it's very clear he doesn't like Donald Trump. Anything he's doing is not to protect Donald Trump. I'm just wondering, again, for those who are trying to figure out why is the Republican leader in the Senate doing this, I'm just wondering if the whole thing is let's get Donald Trump behind us. I don't want to spend the next year and a half figuring out how much Donald Trump was laughing at the White House when he was seeing pictures of cops being beaten up with an American flag. I don't want to be, having to answer for Donald Trump not calling the National Guard in fast enough. Just, Republicans having to answer that question day in and day out as they move through 2021 and into 2022, because this would go into 2022, regardless of what the legislation says, because that a lot of people being subpoenaed would fight those subpoenas.
Right. And as much as Senator McConnell may dislike Donald Trump, he likes more the idea of being Senate Majority Leader again. And that's what he's making a calculation here. He's trying to win. He thinks this is best for the Republicans in the Senate. This is the best move for his caucus because of exactly what you said, Joe, that he doesn't want this to turn into a months-long, potentially years-long odyssey with more revelations, keeping January 6th in the news, being more damaging. We have seen this just from that date itself, that every time we see a new piece of video, every time we hear from a new witness, including in a test we heard yesterday from the mother of the Capitol police officer who was killed there. It is so heart-wrenching. It's such a difficult day. Those are not headlines that are good for the Republicans who had senators object to the election results. And, of course, that violence was incited by the former president. So that's the calculation McConnell has made to try to block this, to try to move forward. We know Speaker Pelosi, as we've been discussing on the show for weeks now, has other options. It could be a select committee, could be the power of the subpoena. But the Republicans' objections to this is what led to last night when Senator Ron Johnson, who, as you mentioned, is the one who said he'd be far more worried if it was Black Lives Matter protesters storming the Capitol as opposed to this pro-Trump riot. He's the one who held up the proceedings, didn't get to votes on things like China and other measures, including January 6th, because he was trying to pull a stunt about the border wall. So the Republicans, again, they're taking their orders from Mitch McConnell, but really it all exists under the shadow of Donald Trump. That's still what they're concerned about because of the grip he has on the party.
Joining us now, best-selling author, acclaimed war correspondent Sebastian Junger. He is out with a new book titled Freedom. Sebastian, good morning. It's great to see you. I want to do a deep dive into your book in just a moment, but as someone who has covered the war in Afghanistan so closely, been going to Afghanistan for 25 years, I think it is. What's your reaction to America after nearly 20 years of war pulling up and leaving? What will that country look like based on what you know once the United States leaves?
Well, I can't see into the future, unfortunately, but I can talk about the risks, I think. Of course, without the U.S. there, we're pulling out a very small number of troops, 2,500, I believe. There's 40,000 cops in New York City, so that gives you a sort of perspective on the size. But that was enough to sort of keep the country more or less glued together, protect the government. Without those troops there, clearly the Taliban are at risk of taking the entire country and imposing their own style of regime on the Afghan people. The Taliban are very, very sophisticated thinkers. They're deep strategic thinkers, or they couldn't have fought us to a standstill for 20 years. So I'm not sure they're necessarily going to impose this really harsh Islamic kind of society that they're infamous for, because they don't want blowback. They don't want to revisit this story with the United States. So they may be more shrewd than that, but clearly the price for this withdrawal will initially be paid by the Afghan people by suppression. Eventually, maybe Al-Qaeda will take root again in Afghanistan, but again, the Taliban may not make that mistake twice. They don't want to go through this again, so who knows?
Yeah, we had the school bombing, a terrible school bombing that killed at least 85 people a couple of weeks ago there. Perhaps a message being sent, but you are as plugged into the veterans community as anybody in this country, Sebastian. What is the feeling among the men and women you know who for 20 years put their lives on the line? Many of them have given their lives for the cause there.
Yeah. You know, interestingly, I think it's been long enough for most of those guys that, I mean, I say guys because I was in a unit that was all male, so that's by association. Yeah. Obviously, many women served there. But I think it's been long enough. I was there in 07, 08. The bulk of the majority of our force was there a few years after that with the surge. I think it's been long enough that there actually isn't a huge amount of conversation about it. I remember when they pulled out of the Korangal Valley, there was a huge conversation. It was a very iconic sort of symbolic place. But then as some veterans pointed out, like, wars end, outposts get dismantled. Like, that's just what happens in every war, and we shouldn't expect anything different of this one.
Well, I suppose. Ready to go?
Sebastian, there was some talk amongst military commanders that if only US forces had had a few more years, 3 to 5 more years, then they could have really shored up the Afghan forces to resist an eventual possible Taliban takeover of the country. Do you buy into the argument that after 2 decades of fighting, another 2 or 3 years really would have made any difference to the country?
Personally, I don't buy into that. I think the main reason the Afghan forces cannot defend themselves, they're the same people. They're just as courageous, just as good fighters as the Taliban. But they're dependent on a government for their ammunition, for their air supply, for reinforcements. A government and a military that is riddled with corruption. And the U.S. never really tackled the corruption in that country. We went in with a light footprint after 2001, 15,000 troops. That's almost nothing. Light footprint and a ton of money that we threw around. The money made the corruption even worse. And of course, back in 1996, when I was there, as the Taliban were taking over, what I was told by many Afghans is that they were letting the Taliban in, even though they hated them. They were letting the Taliban in because the Taliban were better than the corruption that the Afghan society was living with. So, you know, the U.S. did not address the main grievance that the Afghan people had, that the Taliban were offering a solution to. And another few years of fighting isn't going to help if we don't address that core issue.
Your book, War, documentary film Restrepo, must read, must watch to understand what's happened there over the years. Let's talk about your latest book, Freedom, Sebastian. It's fascinating because you really, you touch on so many different moments of freedom over, 5,000 years or something like that. And it starts with this incredible trek that I'd love to hear you talk more about, 400 miles, I think it was, where you and a couple of other guys just started walking from Washington up to Philly, then turned west into the Allegheny Mountains. All told, it was 400 miles. Why did you do that, and what did you learn on the trek?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we called it high-speed vagrancy. We were walking along the railroad lines. We were moving 10, 15, 20 miles a day. We were, it's completely illegal out there. There aren't a lot of cops out there unless they're actually looking for you, which sometimes they were looking for us, once with a helicopter, but we always managed to avoid them. It's the rail lines are these swaths of no man's land that just crisscross America, and you could sort of do what you want, right? We were drinking out of creeks and sleeping under bridges and abandoned buildings, and it's not the wilderness where you're supposed to hike. It's this weird mix of urban and farm and woods and suburbs. It's a mix of everything. You have to hide from the trains because the engineers will call you in. We got very, very good at moving sort of tactically. I mean, by that I mean staying out of sight, taking care of ourselves, making sure our security was okay. We had one machete to defend ourselves if it came to that. It never did, obviously. And I realized at the end of this that we'd all been in a lot of combat, and the sort of close fraternity of a small group in tough circumstances felt very familiar and very, very good. And what I realized later is that over 400 miles, we were the only people in the world who knew where we were, right? And that's one definition of freedom. And so I go on from there to talk about how humans, for tens of thousands of years, one of their core values is freedom. It's defending their community and their children and freedom. And it's one of the few things that people will die for. And so I write about how humans maintain their freedom. There's three basic techniques. You can run away from your oppressor, you can defeat him in battle, or you can outthink him. And so my book's divided into run, fight, and think.
Sebastian, as you know, in the news just even today, there's been such a bastardization of the term of freedom in some quarters about what it means to be free. I'm not going to wear a mask because of my freedom. I'm not going to get the vaccine because of my freedom. Those are just recent examples. What does freedom mean to you? How do you see the word freedom? Obviously, it means different things to different people, but what is freedom to you?
Yeah, it's like I'm not going to stop at red lights because of my freedom. I mean, you can, you phrase it differently, and it shows you how absurd it is. People, when they say the word freedom in terms of this society, they're really talking about their rights. It's not freedom. They're talking about their rights within our society. And those rights are decided upon by the group. You may disagree. You can move to Somalia if you don't want people to telling you what to do. Essentially, what you have the right to is to be free from oppression. You don't have the right to be free from obligation. If you live in a society, you have to accommodate its rules and its norms, like driving on the right-hand side of the road and stopping at red lights, and sometimes wearing a mask. I mean, the government might be wrong. You might disagree. There's avenues for recourse. You can go to the courts. You can go to the ballot box. But as long as you're benefiting from this society, you kind of have to play along with its rules. And that's been true since humans were living in groups of 30 or 40 people in our prehistory. I mean, and it's still true in a nation of 330 million. It doesn't really change that basic relationship between the individual and the group.
I cannot do this yet.
Sebastian, Michael Steele's here with a question for you. Michael?
Yeah. Hey, Sebastian. Man, I love where you're going with this book and this concept, but here's the rub. The reality of it is, particularly picking up on your last point, that there's a difference between being free from oppression versus being free of obligations. What do we do and how do we respond, and what was your experience in the journey you took to understand that distinction, and why are so many of us getting it wrong? Why are so many of us distorting that very fine line between being free from an oppressor to the point that we ourselves, in promoting that, become oppressors?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's an eternal debate between conservatives and liberals. Where does the government's authority end in terms of what it can tell you to do, right? And I would say the conservatives are they err on the side of the government doesn't have any right to tell you what to do, and liberals, I think, err in the opposite direction. It's a sort of nanny state that can frankly be annoying to everybody. So
Tonight, inside the mass shooting here in California that killed 9 transit workers, authorities now say the gunman deliberately targeted some of his co-workers, going building to building, firing 39 shots. His weapons, 3 semi-automatic handguns and 32 illegal magazines. The surveillance of him before the horror, getting into a truck with a bag. And were warning signs missed? The 9 victims now identified, ranging from 29 to 63. What we're learning about them. The travel crush, 37 million Americans hitting the road for Memorial Day. More states easing mask mandates. Could it be the most normal holiday since the pandemic hit? The mother of fallen Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick on the Hill urging GOP senators not to block a January 6 riot commission. Her powerful plea saying she couldn't stay quiet anymore as the nation prepares to mark 100 years since the Tulsa massacre. My report on the new effort to shine a light on the city's dark past. And ahead of Memorial Day, the man on a mission for families of fallen World War II heroes.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from the Santa Monica Pier in California.
Good evening. Millions of Americans are on the move tonight, reclaiming the rights of summer's unofficial start after more than a year of COVID. And we're on the road tonight, too, coming to you from the world-famous Santa Monica Pier in California. This evening, what travel looks like and how safe we are as we gather again in big numbers this Memorial Day weekend holiday. We'll get to that in a few moments, but first to Northern California, where the chilling details of yesterday's mass shooting in San Jose have been revealed. 9 people fatally gunned down by a co-worker at a transit rail yard. Today, we're learning more about the victims who span generations and lost their lives after reporting to work for a morning shift. Miguel Almaguer is there and has the latest.
Tonight, survivors say the gunman was deliberate, fast, and targeted employees, murdering some and letting others live, moving from building to building during his killing spree, firing at least 39 shots. Armed with 3 handguns and 32 illegal high-capacity magazines, authorities fear he planned to kill more than 9 people at this rail yard before he was confronted by officers and took his own life.
There was more than 100 people in this area, and the suspect had bags of ammunition. You think the bloodshed could have been much higher?
I absolutely do.
The sheriff says this video outside the gunman's home shows him leaving with his bag of weapons and ammunition. Tonight, investigators have found no manifesto or apparent motive.
I wasn't shocked.
The gunman's ex-wife says he was a loner and unpredictable, but never saw this coming.
It's been the longest day of my life.
Today, with families finally reunited, rail yard employees remembered the victims, who ranged in age from 29 to 63. Paul McGee's wife said of her husband, "I'll miss having my best friend by my side. I love you always." Jose Hernandez's father says his son was filled with joy.
He was just a good person. Really, he was just a good person.
Taptesh Singh, a husband and father of 2, warned others the gunman was coming before he lost his own life.
His last moments, he was still working for others. He was making phone calls to his friends saying, "Please, he's an active shooter, do not come in."
Tonight, a final act of heroism in the face of so much terror.
Miguel, it appears the gunman didn't have much in the way of a criminal history and had worked at that yard for some time.
Yeah, Lester, he worked here for over a decade. He was making a comfortable living, over $100,000 a year. Tonight, there is no clear reason why he suddenly snapped. Lester?
Miguel Almaguer tonight in San Jose. Thank you. This evening, the kind of holiday travel crush we haven't seen in well over a year. Americans, as you can see around me, are feeling more confident, with over 165 million receiving at least 1 vaccine dose. California now offering a whopping $116 million in cash and gifts to encourage vaccinations, while Ohio has its first vaccine millionaire. Here's Morgan Radford.
Finally, the wait is over. Tonight, Abigail Buginski is a millionaire just for getting vaccinated.
I still can't believe it.
She became the first winner of Ohio's $1 million vaccination jackpot.
It feels like this is happening to a different person.
And 14-year-old Joseph Costello won a full-ride college scholarship.
I was very happy about it.
The Ohio lottery, just one of several state incentives to get people vaccinated as travel ramps up to pre-pandemic levels ahead of the holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable traveling right now?
I do. I've been traveling over the past year. I feel pretty safe. Yeah.
Travel experts predict 37 million people will get away this weekend, with nearly 2.5 million Americans boarding airplanes, up almost 600% from this time last year.
We expect this week to be 115,000, 120,000 passengers each day.
Miami International Airport offering on-site vaccinations for travelers. This as more states lift mask restrictions across the country. New Jersey will no longer require masks indoors starting Friday, just a day before Massachusetts fully reopens. New York sending mobile vaccination buses to the beach, as Connecticut's governor encourages people to enjoy the summer.
Today, I'm telling you, get out of the damn house.
But not everyone is totally ready to return to normal.
If people aren't social distancing, wearing a mask, then I won't be in that area.
President
There'll be
Biden
no
wants
bargaining
70% of
this
all
time.
American adults
Just
to have
you
received at least
silent.
one shot by July 4th. So far, already about half of all states are on track to make that deadline. Lester?
Morgan Radford tonight. Thank you, Morgan. For more on where we stand going into this weekend, I spoke with Dr. Paul Simon. He's the Chief Science Officer at the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. What do you say to the thousands, millions who may crowd beaches like this up and down the state?
Well, I would say it is time to celebrate. We're definitely moving in the right direction. Our numbers are very low. I think people can feel comfortable being out, but very importantly, we want as many people as possible to be vaccinated.
Are you still asking for social separation because it's obviously not happening?
Ideally, we want separation, but very importantly, much safer to be outside than inside. I think out here, particularly at the beach, where there's a nice breeze, I think it's very, very safe. But as you can see, there are a number of people that are wearing masks, and we would encourage that.
At one point at the depth of this pandemic, these beaches were closed, and now we're told that being outside is probably the safest, right, around this moving air. So can you defend the science then and now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a critical difference, I think, between then and now was that the virus was circulating at much higher levels. We're clearly seeing less circulating virus. I think we can attribute a lot of that to the successful efforts to get people vaccinated. There is a certain level of natural immunity in the population as well.
So fair to say you're feeling pretty good about this holiday weekend?
Yeah, I would say, again, cautiously optimistic. We are urging people, again, to sort of maintain some adherence to the masks and to distancing. But we're expecting come mid-June, across California, we're going to be opening things back up.
The mother of a U.S. Capitol Police officer who died a day after the January 6th attack on the Capitol was on Capitol Hill today pleading to Republican senators to support a commission looking into the riot. Here's Peter Alexander.
Tonight, an emotional last-minute plea from the mother of the late Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick.
Usually I'm staying in the background, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore.
Gladys Sicknick on Capitol Hill personally lobbying Senate Republicans to back a bipartisan commission to investigate the January 6th attack, calling their opposition a slap in the face. Brian Sicknick died of natural causes the day after the riot.
This was to uphold the Constitution, and right now I don't think they're doing it.
35 Republicans in the House joined Democrats to approve the commission. Tonight, President Biden in Ohio denounced Senate Republicans who oppose it.
I can't imagine anyone voting against the establishment of a commission on the greatest assault since the Civil War.
But most Republican senators say the attack by a pro-Trump mob is already being investigated by law enforcement and Congress, accusing Democrats of a purely political exercise.
They'd like to continue to litigate the former president into the future.
Then there's President Biden's trimmed down $1.7 trillion infrastructure plan. Republicans have slammed his proposals as a tax and spending spree, their latest counteroffer today moving closer to $1 trillion, focused on roads, bridges, and public transit, and without the tax hikes President Biden is calling for.
What makes them think we want to undo the tax reform that gave us the best economy of my lifetime?
President Biden says he'll meet with Senate Republicans again next week. The White House set Memorial Day as a deadline for progress. And today the president warned negotiations need to end soon. Lester?
Peter Alexander at the White House. Thanks. Less than a month after hackers took down a major fuel pipeline on the East Coast, the Biden administration is ordering oil and gas companies to do more to prevent it from happening again. Tom Costello has details for us.
3 weeks after gas stations went temporarily dry and fuel prices soared, Homeland Security today ordered oil and gas companies to take immediate steps to guard against another cyber attack. Designate a company's cybersecurity coordinator who's available 24/7. Review company operations and notify Homeland Security of any cyber vulnerabilities within 30 days. And immediately report and coordinate cyber incidents. Companies that don't comply could be fined up to $7,000 a day.
We do this. Ransomware is one of the greatest cybersecurity threats that we face in the United States.
But it's the TSA that's in charge of pipeline cybersecurity. The former director of Homeland Cybersecurity, CISA, says TSA can't do it alone.
We need additional support from other agencies like CISA, like the intelligence community, and also the Department of Energy.
Meanwhile, big oil is facing another potential threat. Shareholders at Exxon and Chevron determined to force those companies to more aggressively address climate change, while a Dutch court has ordered Shell to cut greenhouse emissions by 45% within 9 years.
The wake-up call loud and clear for big oil from both shareholders and the courts. Change your business model to better combat climate change.
It comes as gas prices hit a 7-year high following that cyber hack, and the green movement is gaining momentum worldwide. Lester?
All right, Tom Costello, thanks. Now to the alarming rise of anti-Asian hate crimes and the fear leading many parents to keep their children out of school. Let's get more now from Vicki Nguyen.
14-year-old Aiden Nakajima Wu worked hard to make it into New York's Stuyvesant High.
What were you most looking forward to as a freshman?
Probably making new friends in high school.
It hasn't happened. First, COVID kept him home, but even after in-person classes resumed, his mom, Mina, says the headlines about assaults on Asian Americans instilled a new layer of fear.
I really felt unsafe sending him, all the way downtown by himself. Have you ever experienced this kind of fear and anxiety before?
Not really. Nothing really has made me this scared for my life.
National data shows just 18% of Asian American students are attending school in person, trailing any other demographic. At PS 130 in New York City's Chinatown, where nearly 87% of the students are Asian American, just 30% have opted for in-person learning. Principal Rennie Fong says it's not just the pandemic.
Is there an additional layer of anxiety for your Asian American students and family?
Yes. One parent said, "Oh, Mr. Fong, can we have more of a police presence?"
He uses these mood meters to help the students and staff.
It felt like we went through a grieving process too. And to love a country and sometimes feel, oh, I'm not getting that love back, hurt in the beginning. But then it became so hopeful because so many people came out in solidarity.
For the Nakajima Wu family, hope that Asian Americans can soon feel safe on the streets and in schools.
I hate them having to feel like they're not American enough.
Vicki Nguyen, NBC News.
Up next, a city confronts the worst act of racial violence in U.S. history a century later. It began 100 years ago this Monday. A white mob attacked a thriving black neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, killing hundreds of people, destroying homes and businesses and dreams. Now, the Tulsa massacre is getting new attention as we confront issues of racial justice today.
Everything you can think of was here.
Christy Williams has made it her life's work to highlight the vibrant black history of Tulsa. She gives tours and tells tales about the successful yet segregated Black Wall Street that stood here 100 years ago, before it was destroyed.
What compels you to do this, to tell this history?
I feel that I owe it to my great Aunt Janie.
Her great Aunt Janie was on a date a century ago at the Dreamland Theater when her life changed in an instant. As many as 300 black Tulsans were killed, nearly 10,000 left homeless, and 35 square blocks reduced to ashes. 1,000 black businesses and homes looted, burned to the ground. It all began after a black teen was arrested for allegedly assaulting a white girl. A white mob gathered to lynch the man while a group of black men gathered to defend him. A shot rang out, leading to the worst act of racial violence in U.S. history. No one was ever held accountable, and that day went unmarked in history books.
In the white community, there was very much a concerted effort to cover this up.
Innocence
didn't talk
blesses
about
your
it
journey.
because you had to work with those same
For
people
freedom.
who came into your homes and who murdered your family and your friends.
And just like that, the stories from that day were covered up, along with hundreds of bodies.
The white authorities didn't care about what happened to the massacre victims. They had a health problem. They were trying to get rid of the bodies as quickly as possible.
Only 2 known victims received a proper burial. But now, after years of advocacy from survivors, descendants, and references in pop culture, the city is working to find those unmarked graves, using ground-penetrating radar to unearth the century-old secrets.
In October, we discovered 12 plain pine box coffins that we believe contain the remains of massacre victims. We don't know if there are others underneath them.
The coffins will be exhumed next month.
What do you want to come out of this? How should Tulsa own this shame?
Let's get those remains to those families so they can have a proper burial.
My mama
But then
is
this
gone.
is where the drum roll of justice actually begins.
Aunt Janie survived that terrifying day, but Christy and the community are hoping the dig will help put a spotlight on Tulsa's dark history to help rebuild a brighter future.
There will not be closure for the Tulsa Race Massacre for a long time, but I think that this will be a reckoning and this will be a step towards healing and reconciliation.
That dig is set to resume on Tuesday, the same day President Biden is expected to visit Tulsa. Up next for us tonight, discovering the lost submarines of World War II in those who served. As we head into the Memorial Day weekend, a story of loss and discovery and the search for the 52 American submarines that disappeared during World War II.
Frederick Cashel was a Navy engineer with a dangerous job, test running submarines during World War II. But to his daughter, Helen Cashel Baldwin, he was just Daddy.
I thought he was Popeye because he was a sailor man.
When did you first learn that something was wrong?
When a couple of naval officers came to our house.
The USS R-12 submarine her father was on had disappeared in the Florida Straits.
I found myself looking for him because there was never a funeral. There was nothing.
Nothing until 70 years later, a discovery by ocean explorer Tim Taylor, who found the R-12 on the bottom of the ocean.
It was not like any other discovery I'd ever made. There were 42 souls on board.
Taylor built a website and announced he was looking for surviving relatives. Thanks to a nephew fascinated by submarines, the website was emailed to Helen.
Well, I called, and it was Tim Taylor. And we talked, and I was so excited that I could say that I was his daughter.
Taylor made it his mission to find the rest of the lost 52 submarines from World War II. So far, he's found 5. And this week, he was honored with the Navy's highest civilian award, the Distinguished Public Service Medal.
The historic value and importance of our work focuses on giving back to these families who supported our country with the ultimate sacrifice.
For every family he finds comes the opportunity of a lifetime. Helen and her siblings sailed out directly above where the R-12 rests, at the bottom of the ocean.
70 years of waiting. It was a life-changing experience.
That's Nightly News for this Thursday from Santa Monica. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
My money is gone.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
I shall strike you down.
Welcome to Sport Rock. I don't know about you all, but this is an exciting day for me. Finally, after a long year, there is finally a very bright
I cannot
light
do this yet.
at the end of this long tunnel. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I have had the opportunity to tour Sport Rock with Lillian. This business started back in 1994 and has grown to what we see here today, another site also here in northern Virginia, 40,000 square feet of just elevated rock climbing opportunities here. As a matter of fact, President Lillian, while she was taking us around, asked Mr. President and I if we'd like to display some of our talents rock climbing today. And because of time constraints, we're going to do that. I want you to all join me and give a round of applause for the President and First Lady of the United States of America. Thank you. Acknowledge that Dr. Biden, who is one of my fellow state employees, we are so grateful that you teach here in Virginia at Northern Virginia Community College. So please welcome the First Lady. As you probably know, there are a number of dignitaries here with us today, and I'd like to give it my best attempt at recognizing some of them. We have Congressman Jerry Connolly. Jerry, thank you for being with us today. My favorite Lieutenant Governor, Congressman Don Beyer, welcome. Senator George Barker, I saw in the audience. Senator, good to see you this morning. Senator Adam Ebbin, thank you very much for your leadership. We have the Speaker, the first woman Speaker of the House of Delegates, Speaker Eileen Philliphorn. Welcome, Eileen. And our leader in the House of Delegates, Charnel Herring. Charnel, welcome. Our Mayor, Justin Wilson, is here with us today. Justin. We have numerous members of our local council and school board. Thank you all so much for being here and your leadership over this past year. And finally, Superintendent Greg Hutchins for helping to put all this together. Thank you. It is also great to see all the students with us today and teachers. They have joined us from schools right here in Alexandria, and I want to tell everybody that this past 14 months have no doubt been a very difficult and unprecedented time for our students, our teachers, and school staff. They have literally made sacrifices, and they are our heroes, and on behalf of all of us, please thank our teachers, our staff, and our students. Today, we mark a tremendous milestone in our fight against COVID-19. As of 12:01 this morning, for the first time since March 2020, there are no limits on capacity or distancing in Virginia's restaurants, businesses, offices, or other venues. That's something that we can all be proud of. We are closer to a more normal life than we have been in the past 14 months. And I don't know about for you, but for me, that feels really good. For this, we can thank the vaccines and the scientists and researchers who developed them. We are now roughly 6 months into the vaccine rollout, and I'm proud to say that 66% of Virginia adults have had their first shot. 54%, more than half of Virginians are fully vaccinated, which puts us 14th amongst all states and ahead of other states in the South. Those are tremendous numbers, and I'm fully confident that Virginia will hit President Biden's goal of 70% of adults getting their first shot by July the 4th. We can see, yes. We can see in real time that the more people get vaccinated, the fewer people get COVID. It is very simple math. Our case counts have been dropping for weeks. 6 weeks ago, we had an average of over 1,600 new cases per day. Today, we have an average of fewer than 400 new cases a day, numbers we haven't seen since